Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar interview. I'm Francis Sealey from GlobalNet 21 and indeed MPhil Voices, a local group as well. And this is a special webinar because we're going to start a series of webinars, we hope, which are about conversations across borders, where we talk about global problems that influence us all, locally and nationally as well as globally. And I'm doing this with Nerina Finetto, who is from Tracy's Dreams, and you can see her there. Do you want to say hello to everyone, Nerina?
Hello, nice to meet you all.
And I'm hoping that Nerina would do all of the conversations across borders with us. And today we're going to be looking at a particular issue, and that's the issue of biodiversity. Biodiversity is not discussed as much as it should be. We talk about climate change, but we don't talk so much about biodiversity, but it impacts us all, whether we're living in a North London borough, a suburb of Paris in Russia, or in Sweden. And incidentally, Nerina comes from Sweden, and Alexander Kagansky, who we're going to interview, is actually in Russia. So this is truly an international experience. So let me welcome them and welcome you all to this. If you are watching on Facebook, you can type in comments and we'll try and pick them up later at another time. Anyhow, let's start with you, Alexander. And I know you've got the name Sasha up on your screen. In case that confuses anyone, that's what I gather Alexander in Russia, they're all called Sasha, you told me, which I never knew before. But anyhow, Alex, can you tell us, first of all, a little about yourself and what made you so interested in biodiversity?
So, hello everyone. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It's very unique opportunity to talk across so far and to reach out to the people. So my area is molecular biology. That's what I have PhD in. And more specifically, it's cancer biology. And the reason why I'm interested in biodiversity is because there is a lot of drugs for cancer are around us. They're already constructed by nature. And these drugs are contained in all these different species. And that's what biodiversity for my job is. But in general, I am interested in nature. I think it's nice to be in the wild nature and to keep all these interesting species alive. And this is a genuine reason to keep them alive, is because they keep us alive. Because more than half of the drugs come from nature.
Okay, Nerina?
What do we mean actually with biodiversity? What do we know and what do we not know about it?
So what we know is that it is species, the different, all genetically and otherwise different species, like humans are different from other large mammals, and there are also plants and mushrooms and seaweed, a lot of microscopic species. So all of it is biodiversity. And we do not know exactly how many species we have. We can have only estimates because a lot of it is very small and very difficult to measure. But we know that we are losing a lot of it because of recent development of humans. And that's what is a big concern, in my opinion.
Maybe you could tell me, Alexander, and that is, you know, back in the 1990s, Edmund Wilson wrote this famous book, The Diversity of Life, which I think was globally famous, and it created a lot of interest at that time. But since then, the whole area of biodiversity has sort of gone under the radar a bit, and now it's come back. I mean, why do you think people had neglected it for so long?
It's hard to say. I think that from the pharmaceutical companies' point of view, it is quite difficult to make money on all of it. So a lot of it was tested, but then because of the costs associated with the clinical trials, it was all slowed down, all this research. Now there is a big comeback because now there are very interesting assays that can be done on the whole cells and even tissues like organoids. And now everything can do in a very high throughput, very small quantities of things can be tested. And people realize that before they thought they will have targeted drugs. So they will find this magic bullet that will kill cancer cells, for example. Now they realize that it's quite difficult. There are a lot of targets, and cancer cells can manage to go around and build another mechanism for survival. So now, again, there is a big interest in the complex mixtures of molecules like provided by the species that we have.
Well, you partly answered my next question, but maybe you could expand upon it. I mean, why is biodiversity important to all of us? Because some people will say, you know, it's animals, it's not us, we're the people that are important. Why do you think it's so crucial?
So on the moral, like ethical perspective, I think we are all one big family of living things that are against this non-existence in the void, in the space. But from a more practical sense, because I think that every living thing, because it's uniquely built by nature for millions of years, you know, a lot of things were evolving for a long time in the complex surroundings together with us. And they are built in a way that we all coexist and support each other's life. So my belief that every living thing has a unique drug against some disease, and losing it, we may deprive future generations of these very special molecules that are very hard to build by design, because we do not know exactly yet even 10% of all of these interesting properties of nature molecules.
Okay, Nerina?
On the website of Extinction Rebellion, you can read many current life forms will be extinct by the end of this century. We might right now be causing the 6th mass extinction in Earth's history. Are we, in your opinion?
Yes, I completely agree. I think that we do not appreciate the value of some of the species. For example, the bees recently created a lot of anxiety because of their reduction in numbers. In general, insects are very big loss in the current situation. They say around 70% or maybe 80%, some measures are lost in my lifetime, in around 45 years. So Einstein predicted that humankind will only live for a few years if the last bee is extinct, because they create all of the bread, a lot of food that we eat are actually pollinated by the different bees. And I think there are a lot of other properties that we need to keep them on. The reason why we were not caring about them, because we didn't take into account how fragile they are. So I think that we are at the extinction phase, and it's not only extinction of things around us, it will also rebound on us. And I'm trying to look at the pharmaceutical angle of it, but there's a food angle and other things, you know, other things. These little creatures are important, like plankton, for example, massively important for the sea, and the sea is crucial for everyone.
And other regions, they are like the hotspot of biodiversity.
Yes, traditionally the Brazilian Amazon, for example, is considered to be a big hotspot. A big proportion of species, the plant species, the mushroom species, insect and birds are living there, and it's the biggest non-interrupted forest on Earth. And also where I am at the far east of Russia, despite there's a lot less species live here, but it's another big patch of wood. And it's very unfortunate to see how this wood is being cleared out for petty wood and stuff like that. And all the species that are living and will never come back. This is a real tragedy of our times, that we do not appreciate how much we lose by trying to extract the small value that we take from the wood things.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you talk very clearly about biomedicine and how pharmaceuticals can benefit from that. But, you know, just to make a distinction for people who are watching or listening, is there a difference between biomedicine and biodiversity? How do those relate to each other?
Yeah, it's a big difference, completely different terms, but I try to see them as the same problem, that without biodiversity, there will be no biomedicine, in my opinion, that predominantly the medications, the drugs come from the nature, and we only took a very small fraction of what we could have. It doesn't mean that we want to kill the species by extracting the good from them. All we need is just information. These molecules, because the synthetic chemistry is so strong now that we can then hope to build molecules based on this information. So we need to preserve biodiversity, not to extract it like in the old days. And this is a little bit of a tug of war in the people's perception, that how can we get something out of nature without killing it? And now I think we have to build this very sustainable ways of doing it. I think that without realizing that humans' health is all related to biodiversity, and without realizing that biodiversity relates to human health, we cannot solve either of the problems. So for me, it is parts of the same things, or a hope, giving hope to the other.
Okay. Nerina?
There might be people saying, but we can create medicines on our own. Why is not that easy, and why do we have to learn from nature?
It is also a very interesting area, the chemistry, by design, by artificial intelligence. But natural processes are very complicated, and the molecules that arrive as the top point of evolution, for example, the toxins from the marine creatures, are so complex. They sometimes are impossible to conceive without understanding where should we go with it, without knowing how they work. So we need to try to understand how small creatures, how animals and plants, they relate to each other. For example, learn what animals consume when they're ill, or how marine snails defend themselves or try to kill fish. All of this information about how in nature molecules are used for transforming the cells, kill the cells, or modify the morphology of the tissues. All this information is precious for us to create our own medicines. And that's how we build the existing medicines in a way. And I think we only researched very small proportion, maybe 1%, maybe less, of all the medical medications that we have on the planet still.
Francis?
Yeah, I thought it was you, sorry. You talk about medicine and biomedicine and biodiversity, and you talk very clearly about how it can affect or influence the cure of cancer and things like that. But biodiversity is also important, isn't it, for the general area of public health?
This is true, yeah. They say that forests are our lungs, you know, they clear out air. They also create oxygen for us, you know, capture the nitrogen and CO2. And it is very important even for mental health. I mean, the simple aspect of going into the wild somehow makes a big difference for the mental health, and they still do not know exactly how it works, that you have random green things in the forest and you feel better, you know. So all of these aspects, they are beyond my area of knowledge, but they also relate to health. The water, clearing out the water, protecting the soil, and so on. I think this is all, and the climate, of course. The climate change also is related to biodiversity, because everyone talks about climate change, but I think that the biodiversity is at the heart of this problem.
I mean, what's also interesting in listening to what you say, I mean, you're talking about biodiversity and new science, but what you're saying, lots of people traditionally used to practice those things. I mean, it's part of what they did. In a way, some of modern science destroyed your science, you know, the traditional values that people held. How important is traditional knowledge? And have we been in a danger of losing that? And do we now need to restore it?
This is an excellent question. And I think that we now are coming to the wisdom of understanding how precious it is. And there is even acknowledged a value. Recently, the Nobel Prize, in maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the Nobel Prize went to the Professor Yu Tu from China for discovery of artemisinin, which is the malaria drug. In fact, it was rediscovery. She used the knowledge from maybe 1,000 years old, from a very well recorded Chinese traditional books. So she took it out. She looked at how the preparation was. So a reward goes to careful keeping the traditional medicine, and there is no boundary between traditional. There should not be boundary. So all these books, the Tibetan medicine, the Indian medicine, the indigenous people's medicines, should be now very precious, kept as a precious value, and maybe researching these books together, trying to translate them and curate them. And if we see that there are, for example, plants of the same family that appear in the same book, this should be researched in the first instance, because this is a very strong indication that if the plants were used for a similar condition, that there is a molecule that will cure the disease. So I think we're at the point where our traditional knowledge can be merged with the modern knowledge, with a very high degree of success.
Okay, Nerina?
You are also one of the initiators of an open platform, knowledge hub for biomedicine and biodiversity. What would it mean thus for us, and what are the challenges here?
Yes, so as a member of a Global Young Academy, so this is an organization of young scientists who decided to come together, around 200 of them from different disciplines, selected on the basis of their interest in doing things on a global scale, trying to solve the questions that are impossible to solve within one discipline or within one country. So we've proposed to organize this open platform that is called Biodiversity for Survival via Biomedicine. So we call it Bio to Bio, Biodiversity to Biomedicine. And this is an open consortium of scientists from over 50 countries and maybe 30 or more disciplines. We try to build awareness of how biodiversity is essential for human survival, for finding medicines of different kinds. So our idea is that we collaborate with NGOs who deal with neglected species, who try to curate them. They hands-on working with them. They know how to sustainably collect them. Take small samples of these species, distribute, carefully make extract, distribute among biomedical specialists from different countries and disciplines. For example, the blood scientists, the cancer scientists, the antibiotic scientists, and create different bits of knowledge with very modern approaches and put together this knowledge. Then we have a very good description of these neglected species that otherwise could be neglected and lost from the planet. But our intention is to give a very strong report to the governments, to the policymakers, to try and protect this for the future, because we suddenly have a drug with several purposes, because we believe that these neglected species, like insects, like caterpillar mushroom, for example, from Nepal, like frog secretions. Frogs are almost extinct, almost going extinct because of some mushrooms. We try to make these species heroes of today and make them live with us as they were living with our ancestors and millions of years before. It would be unfair to just let them go without even helping our health and having our children and grandchildren to treat their diseases. That's
so you know, you're getting these people together and they sound like they're scientists and experts, but I was quite interested in saying you also try to work with NGOs. So are you trying not just to get experts to talk together, but also create generally out there a greater awareness of the issue you think is important?
Absolutely. Yeah, we think that we also have outreach capacities among us. So we will try to educate young people about the biodiversity that they live on and about the value of it. We already do summer, like not summer camps, but children's camps. We did it in Cambodia, where we went to schools and NGOs around one part of Cambodia, and with the microscopes and try to look at the insects. And Nerina made a great little film about it. But the idea is try to get these things that people don't care about to their attention, and explain to them that there might be value in them, there might be prosperity in them, there might be longevity in them. You know, that these should survive, as they are not, they should not be neglected, this species. So that's our idea.
And the Congress you recently organized, I mean, was that a part of that mission? I mean, what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, so yeah, there's few conferences we're trying to organize, and the first Bio-to-Bio conferences in the coming year in Uzbekistan. But recent one we had here on Ruski Island. I've invited the Nobel Prize laureate, the Tim Hunt, whose discovery that led to the Nobel Prize was thanks to biodiversity. It was made on sea urchins. He said that to get the Nobel Prize, look at something neglected, look at something that nobody else cares about. So he looked at the oocyte division of the sea urchin and found out the basic mechanism of life. And he says that this became the global hit for medicine, because a lot of cancer drugs started to use cell cycle as the paradigm for creating the anti-cancer drugs, which created billions and billions of pounds in these trials of these drugs. So the idea of this Congress was to put biodiversity in the spotlight for the future health. And that's our future intention as well.
Okay, and Nerina?
What do you think the future of biomedicine look like? Do you have some examples for us?
So, of course, there's a lot of success now in immunotherapy of cancer. I'm a little bit biased to the cancer field, but I also think that if we succeed in standardizing our assays for testing all the thousands and thousands of interesting marine organisms, they're supposed to be 100,000, maybe 100,000 new drugs. There is an estimate from a recent paper in the sea. Then there's a lot of insects which have very strong chemicals in them, which before were not available because they're so small. Now with the modern methods, we can find completely new molecules, and that's what I think the future of biomedicine will be. We will test very many drugs, much more than we are capable of doing now, and cancer is such a complex set of diseases that we will need a lot of molecules and a lot of combinations. So I think we need to grow the open platform of scientists who produce the data that will both protect the species and create new molecules.
I think that a lot of people are listening to this will have learned a lot about biodiversity that they didn't know before, and they want to act on it just like they do on climate change, for example. And you argue that, you know, if we don't act now, then we're losing new solutions to human-focused problems. So if people want to act now, what would you recommend they do? How can they help in this mission to save the species on our planet? They're so important to us all.
I think that telling, maybe spreading this message is very important. Trying to be to live sustainably and try not to be part of this massive extinction, and maybe create awareness among young people in the school if they have such an option, or contact me, contact Bio2Bio in order to try to do it together, because we are trying to grow our platform. We are still in our infancy, and we even do not have formal established organization. But if people would like to give us a hand, if they know, because we are scientists and we are very busy in the labs, but we would like to take a break and establish this as an education platform, as a science platform, and any bit of help would be great. So if interested people could email me, and maybe if you could put my email at the top of the screen or somewhere, I would love to come give a seminar or discuss it, try new ways we could stop the extinction of the species and promote research of the drugs based on them.
Yeah, well, Nerina's going to ask you about how we contact you in a minute, but one thing that sort of made me think when you were answering that question, of course, is that we're now getting hundreds of thousands of young people interested in climate change, and they're making very strong protests. And is it important to, say that there is a correlation between climate change and biodiversity as well? Because if we make that correlation, then I think young people will pick that up as a part of their campaign against climate change.
That's a very good point. And for me, the biodiversity is the central bad thing, that is the crisis in biodiversity is central bad. The reason the connection is there, I think, is because it's so rapid compared to the natural changes in the climate. So when species, in the millions of years ago, when there would be subtle changes in the climate, species could adapt, could change as well. Here they almost have nowhere to go. So if there is a small patch of the forest remaining, and the climate change is clearing out all the insects from it, just because they have nowhere to go, because the air nearby is polluted, and so on. So I think these things are connected, and which will hit us stronger, I don't know. But I think that if frogs will be gone because of the combination of tourism, climate change, and the pollution, and if insects are gone, humans will have very little hope. So I think we could ask young people to put species on their banners too, because they're part of our big family. It's unfair. They were here millions of years before us. How can we clear them out?
Okay, so Nerina, over to you to the last question.
Yes, so actually you already answered how we could reach out to you if we want to support you. But perhaps the very last question, if somebody would like to start learning more about biodiversity, do you have any suggestion of a book or a website or something that where
yes, we can publish the Bio2Bio website, but we definitely are looking into building a better education platform where we have links from all corners of the world. There are nice books. There is a book from Thailand. I will maybe send the links later. But I think that the video of Bio2Bio and Bio2Bio website is a good start.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, we've sort of almost got through our 30 minutes, and I think it's been a really, really great start for Conversations Across Borders. I think you explained a lot. You've, I think, enlightened a lot of people who haven't thought about what biodiversity is, how it links with medicine, how it links with climate change. And those links, I think, are really, really vital. So, thank you for doing that. We will turn this into a YouTube video. We will turn it into a podcast as well, an audio podcast. And we'll make sure people have a link to your email address so they can contact you. So thank you for doing it, Alexander. And thanks, Nerina. I think this is great. And if we keep doing these conversations across borders, I think it'll work very well. Do you think it went well, Nerina?
Well, I think that I really like it, and I think we found the flow, even if it was our first time together. I really like it. Thank you so much, Sasha.
I would like to thank you as well, and thanks a lot for organizing that. I would like to thank Global Young Academy as well to make it happen. And thanks to every listener. I think despite it sounds like a tragedy, I think we have hope and we can do something about it.
Okay, well, thanks very much. And if anyone gets an email from someone called Sasha, they will know it's from Alexander. Okay, so thank you very much for doing it, Alexander. And thanks, Nerina, for helping to achieve this. And we'll finish this webinar interview now.